When Eton master Will Knowland was sacked last year over what were deemed anti-feminist views contained in a YouTube video, which he refused to take down, some alumni and other critics called out the school's intellectual conformism. This week, Will was cleared by the Teaching Regulation Agency because the comments did, quote, not amount to unacceptable professional conduct. Will Knowland joins me now. Well, that's a bit of a result, isn't it? You must be thrilled.
Excellent, yeah. I feel like it's been a vindication because throughout I've said there was no professional misconduct. Teachers are allowed to stimulate debate.
Yes.
And the problem was Eton's internal policies.
So I think what we should do for the audience who may not be aware is sort of just outline what it is you were accused of. So there was a series of lectures, which I believe were extracurricular lectures for the boys at Eton, and you produced one about the patriarchy called the patriarchy paradox. And that refers to the studies that have shown that as society becomes more gender inclusive, people tend to gravitate towards traditional gender roles, right? So when the state now, and that would seem, because if the patriarchy is something that is socially constructed, you would expect the reverse, right? So you created this video, and what happened then?
Well, the whole idea of the course Perspectives is to expose boys to a range of viewpoints to stimulate debate. And my brief was to, in the space of about 30 minutes, just provoke some stimulating discussion. So it's a 30-minute talk with about 40 academic references in, just giving them a viewpoint that is one they don't normally encounter.
Yeah.
But the lecture was pulled from Eton after one member of staff watched it in advance and complained that allowing boys to discuss it might create a hostile work environment. It was already on YouTube by that point, and I had a channel to help fulfill my role in giving educational public benefit, working for a charity, with the college's permission, with a disclaimer on, so everything I could possibly have done.
But so the disclaimer was basically saying this isn't Eton's view.
Yeah, exactly,
Exactly, okay.
And they told me to put the disclaimer on the channel, so it was all agreed with them. But not only was it cancelled at Eton, but the request came in to take it off YouTube too. Okay. And I said, well, it's a bit disappointing, what's the reason? And then no reason was given, and I left it up.
So why was this video deemed particularly controversial? I mean, I from what I understand, you actually were attempting initially to have another teacher present a counter-argument as part of the course, because this course was to stimulate debate.
Yeah.
And so, in a sense, was the video deliberately provocative, or was it exactly what you think about the subject?
Well, the whole point of the course is to provoke debate, so it was intentionally provocative. But I don't think there's anything especially controversial in the video in terms of individual viewpoints, other than a thread of biological essentialism, saying that men and women are different, those differences have consequences. And
well, that's quite a controversial view now, Will. I mean, it sort of is now, though, isn't it, if you think about it? Like the idea of biological essentialism, the idea that saying there are biological reasons why men gravitate towards certain roles in society and women gravitate towards others, that is deemed quite a controversial thing to say, isn't it? Were you not aware of that?
Oh, I was aware of it, but I think it's important to confront controversial things head on and think about why they're controversial rather than shy away from it. I think a course like that should make people question some of the prevailing attitudes in modern culture rather than just stifle debate.
I suppose some of your critics would say that what the video was doing, though, was sort of saying that violence, for instance, that it comes naturally to boys and almost encouraging them to indulge in it because it's part of their nature, and that this might not go down well with, say, some of the more naturally, instinctively sensitive boys at the school, or gay boys at the school who might not see their roles as to protect a woman, you know what I mean? So do you take on board some of those criticisms?
Well, it's an interesting point to make, but it's also fascinating, I think, that there's a big debate about incel culture and toxic masculinity online. So given that is already happening, I think it's best to confront these ideas openly in schools. And the message of the video was that if there is innate violence in men, then it's important that it's been put in the service of protecting women and children throughout history. So in that sense, patriarchy has been about protecting rather than oppressing.
How did the boys react to when you were sacked, or indeed the whole procedure?
There was a long letter that the boys wrote in my defence and was signed by over 3,000 people saying they were disturbed, but the direction the school was heading in was that if one person gets upset by an idea, then debate is cancelled.
So that's pretty standard among the way things are going in culture at the moment. Is if a few people, it just takes a handful of people to be upset or say they feel unsafe. That's the word they often use. You just use the word hostile. They say that this creates a hostile environment. And all of a sudden, employers have to take it seriously, because then it's a health and safety issue. It's not just someone... There wasn't a teacher coming along saying, I don't agree with what Mr. Knowland is saying. It was someone saying, this creates hostility. This makes us unsafe. Was that your experience of Eton? Do you think Eton's going in that direction?
Increasingly so, and that direction is at odds with what Eton has traditionally stood for. We're talking about the school where George Orwell went.
Yeah.
If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they don't want to hear.
Yeah.
So I think that's what disturbs so many people about it.
Do you have any idea? I mean, I keep getting contacted by teacher friends of mine who are going through similar things, not to your extent, but they're having to sit through workshops where they're being told to think in a certain ideological way and to pass that on to the kids. But it seems to be more prevalent amongst the richer schools, and Eton, you can't get much more privilege than Eton. Do you think there's any reason for that?
It might be that there's an insecurity at the heart of some of these institutions now. They don't have the courage or confidence to really stand up for what they traditionally stood for.
Yeah.
So they want to try and appease a culture that is ultimately very hostile to them.
Yes.
I don't think the appeasement's going to work. Nothing will ever be enough.
No, but it was very interesting to me when a lot of private schools were saying, that issuing statements saying we get behind Black Lives Matter, for instance. At the time, the Black Lives Matter movement was explicitly saying it was a capitalist movement, and those schools would be the first to be demolished under an anti-capitalist regime. So it didn't really make any sense. And I do wonder whether sometimes it's the most privileged, almost atoning for the fact that they are so privileged. I don't know. But it's interesting to see that this was particularly struck a nerve because it was about boys in a boys' school. And as I say, from what I gather, the boys were behind you. They were fine about having the debate, and you invited debate. You wanted them to push back. You wanted them to grapple with it, not just to uncritically endorse what you were saying. Is that right?
Yeah, the whole point of the course is that boys are encouraged to disagree with the viewpoints put forward in the lectures.
Yeah.
They'd be split up into groups in follow-up classes and told, you argue against it, you argue for it. What do you think the strengths and weaknesses are? And the fact that they weren't allowed to have that opportunity because a member of staff felt it would have been threatening is, I think, deeply concerning. If Eton's going in this direction and it's spearheading the suppression of curriculum content in British education, it's potentially disastrous consequences.
Yeah, I mean, it's just odd to me that a school, accuses its pupils of privilege and all the rest of it when they are. You have to spend a lot of money to get there, don't you? How are you feeling about the whole thing? Do you feel that you want to still be a teacher? Has it left you disillusioned in any way?
Disappointed, I think.
Okay.
I'm pleased about the TRA clearance, so could potentially work in another school. But at the moment, I'm happy doing my teaching online. I think there's an extra freedom there.
Yeah.
And we might see a shift towards more of that in UK education.
Okay, so at the moment, that's how you're going to earn your living, is through online tutorials.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and that does make sense. But I wouldn't write off teaching altogether. I think it's a good thing. Were you disappointed as well with the staff and the way that they reacted? Did you have much support from other people at the school?
Yeah, I had lots of support, including from some of the female teachers at Eton. So it was odd that you've got the school stepping in, saying that, no, on behalf of the female teachers, we want to protect them from the debate. But the female teachers themselves saying, no, we want to have the debate. Yes. So if anything, there's a kind of sexism there and assuming that the female teachers are too fragile to cope with it.
Yeah, and one of the points about the video, and I did watch the video, and I thought it was very interesting, and it is still available to watch, isn't it? People can see it online.
Yeah.
But it is the provocation. It struck me that actually what you were doing is that it was almost a teaching tool. That you have like the clip from 300, which is quite a sort of deliberately hyper masculine clip, and it did strike me that, and I've been a teacher, so I know this, that sometimes you have to throw something out there that maybe even you don't fully believe yourself, but it's pushing them in a certain way. Was this at all part of what your strategy was there? Yeah,
of course. The lectures take place before lunch, and most kids are thinking about the sandwiches. They're a bit bored.
Yeah, of
course.
So
a few film clips go a long way towards it being memorable.
Yeah, of course. Do you think there's a particular challenge with boys when you're teaching boys, though, when it comes to this kind of thing? And, it's quite interesting to me that at the start of the video, you don't apologise for it, but you make the point that this is going to ruffle some feathers. But has that been your experience with teaching boys? Have you had that feeling that they're more sensitive, perhaps, than they used to be?
I think there's a tiptoeing around certain topics, but I don't think that does anyone any good. If anything, it just increases the chances they'll be radicalised online, because the allure of the forbidden will start to gather around these topics that aren't being brought into the classroom.
But what about this issue of free speech? Because you also do this other thing in the video where you defend yourself from a position of free speech, saying we're in a society, we have to be able to talk about difficult issues. Now, the counter-argument to that would be, well, you're dealing with school children here, and actually these people need to be socialised first, and then they can have all the free speech they like later on. Do you have much truck with that view?
The intended audience of the lecture was extremely intelligent sixth formers. And I don't think they need to be shielded from intellectual views whatsoever. I think they're more than capable of dealing with them. And I'm disappointed that I didn't get to hear the full force of what the boys' rebuttal would have been, because I think they would have engaged with it really well. So I don't think we should patronise students by saying, there's all this exciting debate, but you can't be a part of it because you're worried about your mental health.
And are they the sort of people that would engage and go off and research some more and,
definitely.
and this kind of thing?
Yeah, that's why all the footnotes were there, so they could go back to the sources and come back with some counter-arguments.
Yeah, that's interesting. And what about your well, I mean, you've just done a video about masculinity, but I'm going to ask you, was it emotionally difficult, this entire, thing that happened to you?
Yeah, very stressful, yeah. So I lost my house with the job, and at the time my wife was pregnant, so 5 children, 1 on the way, thinking, what will I do next?
Yeah.
And it was also difficult because it meant a lot to me working at Eton because of what the institution's traditionally been about.
And so you've been there 9 years.
Yeah,
right?
so
a long time.
That's it, yeah. I thought it was like my dream job, but then it just started to disappear day by day before my eyes. And in a sense, I'd already lost the job before I was sacked. So that was the hard bit to come to terms with.
And do you feel that now, when people search you, think that's going to come up now? So does this affect your prospects later on, do you think?
No, if anything, it's been the opposite. So some people will contact me saying, I like the video, well done for making the stand that you did.
So you would do it all again, you think?
Yeah, because I don't think there's a happy ever after from just self-censoring for 20 years, 30 years career. That's not what anybody goes into teaching for, deep down.
Yeah, I mean, my experience from teaching as well is I do get the feeling that there is a nervousness now, and teachers that I know certainly stop taking risks in the classroom. I hear this all the time because they fear there are too many. There's too much danger in doing so. If you treat certainly the older pupils as adults, and you are provocative and you do all those things that actually kids really love.
Yeah.
Then all it takes is 1 or 2 to complain and use that as ammunition against you. Do you think that is right? Do you think my analysis is right there?
I think you're exactly right. And more people need to start pushing back against it. That principle, use it or lose it.
Yeah.
The more you self-censor, the more you'll be expected to. And nothing's more important than education in terms of affecting the culture of a country and ultimately the politics beyond that too. So it all starts in the schools.